poverty and makes poverty alleviation very difficult. So due to this allocation of resources that the government receives. So this clearly damages our pillar of cultural sensitivity. Given the cultural relativism between what's deemed as right and what's deemed as wrong, I feel that defining corruption is a bit tricky. Nevertheless, Transparency International has been able to put forth the definition of corruption that's most widely accepted, and that's the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. The United Nations Global Compact furthers this definition and applies it to the business sector by saying that business needs to work against corruption in all its forms, including extortion and bribery. And the interaction between extortion and bribery, I think, underscores an illicit public-private partnership in which government and multinational corporations are engaging in bribery or extortion, where one maybe points the finger to the other and no one is directly responsible. So why should business care about fighting corruption? Well, in focus of my paper was publicly traded companies, for the same reasons that Patrick outlined. And also, as I was doing my research, I realized that multinational corporations, in trying to maximize shareholder wealth and now in assuming the responsibilities that Patrick laid out, maybe perhaps have greater practical experience of managing the needs for today and meeting the long-term goals of tomorrow, which very well reflects the very definition of sustainable development. So perhaps the public sector or the private sector has a practical understanding of sustainable development that the government and civil society might lack. Aside from the risk management and unpredictability side of it, in the notion that there's no guarantee of an exchange of services, you don't know what you're really paying for when you're paying a bribe. And despite the fact that the world today has denoted corruption or bribery as a $1 trillion a year business, and also despite the fact that maybe a company wants to be proactive versus reactive in terms of preparing for future legislation, not necessarily allowing its destiny to be in the hands of legislators, I found that the most interesting business case rested with that of senior leadership and personal conviction, in which a survey of 165 multinational corporations, the CEOs were interviewed, and they cited, 33% of them cited their personal convictions as the primary reason for engaging in anti-corruption initiatives. 13% said that bribery is just plain wrong, and just 4% cited the cost of doing business. In other words, the three prior bullet points here as the reason for engaging in anti-corruption initiatives. In terms of what the actors are doing, I didn't really get into it much since my focus was in the private sector, but on the most basic level, government is the one responsible for forming compliance regimes. We see the United States with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in 1977 was one of the first pieces of U.S. law that regulated companies internationally. And then with civil society, I find that civil society's main role under the guise of Transparency International is that of implementation and awareness raising. Transparency International has really pinpointed both government and business, highlighted their deficiencies in this arena with the Corruption Perception Index, in which it rates the most corrupt governments in the world, and then the Bribe Payers Index rates the most corrupt multinational or companies in the world, the ones who are most likely to pay a bribe. The private sector's role in combating corruption might not be something that is a traditional or considered a traditional responsibility of the private sector. However, in my research, I find that MNCs are giving increased importance to stakeholder engagement, the corporate social responsibility function, innovative corporate governance mechanisms, and collective action and knowledge sharing. The first three are clearly highlighted as the responsibility to sustainable development from the private sector, as Patrick previously pointed out. And collective action and knowledge sharing is also engaging civil society and other companies and competitors, which is kind of a new, or it's a touchy subject, especially around corruption. You don't really want to share what you've done bad lately with your industry competitor. But I have used the case of the Federation of Nepalese Chambers of Commerce and Industry to apply the framework for sustainable development. You guys all have a slide of it. As you can see, the bulk of the responsibilities actually derives from civil society, which I thought was interesting. And here we see a bridge between private sector leaders and private sector leaders acting as components of civil society, chambers of commerce clearly being a civil society actor. So, for the interest of time, I won't delve further into our slide, but you guys can read further. Yeah. The business contributions to the pillars of sustainable development are, with regards to cultural sensitivity, I thought that the pillar of cultural sensitivity was actually going to be a challenge in my paper. And as I investigated it further, the business world definitely suffers a huge challenge when it comes to either respecting cultural norms of gift giving or bribe paying versus their responsibility to remain transparent. And I found that a strong corporate culture is what can abate this, or what can diffuse this conflict between respecting cultural norms and remaining transparency. If you have a strong corporate culture, you can diffuse this tension. In terms of good governance, multinational corporations can encourage transparency within a government. Most clearly, or it's most obvious in the example of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, where companies sign on and promise to publish what they're paying the government. So in this way, the government feels a responsibility to its own people because what they've earned from an investment is made public. In terms of environmental sustainability, a good company with strong environmental health and safety standards can become a partner of choice, and it also help a government law with corruption to install best practices in the environment. With the challenges of multinational companies and leading the anti-corruption initiatives worldwide is that of upholding global values, and it's very difficult for a multinational corporation to spread one value across many nations. Getting government and business on board is really difficult, especially where cronyism prevails, the notion that business leaders depend on personal and political connections for their positions of power. Clearly, circumventing the system is always profitable, which leads us to the notion of black markets. The solution to a corruption issue in one area might end up creating a market to abate the corruption issue in another area. And then organized crime in the zones of weak governance is also a huge issue for companies. And Maria will talk more about organized crime as it applies to our framework for sustainability.